Welcome to Firestop Feed, the pyrophobic podcast about passive fire safety solutions.
You know, I was driving the other day, and it's that silence, right? That's the thing you notice about modern EVs. They feel so serene. But then it got me thinking about what's actually happening under the floorboards. You're sitting on this massive amount of stored chemical energy, and we tend to worry about the range or charging speed or the cell chemistry.
That's what everyone focuses on, is the cathodes, the anodes, the energy density. I mean, that's the sexy science.
Exactly. But I've been digging through this stack of documents you sent, specifically a technical guide from Pyrophobic Systems that just came out January 2026, and it just hit me.
Yeah.
We completely ignore the bodyguard.
The bodyguard.
Yeah, the physical barriers that are actually keeping all that energy contained.
It's so easy to overlook. You just assume the safety is that it's just there. But under that casing, there's an incredible amount of engineering going on to manage the what-ifs.
Right. And this document we're looking at, Injection Molding versus Extrusion for OEM Engineers, it highlights this really specific battle that happens long before a car ever hits the road.
A very stressful one.
And on the surface, that title, Injection Molding versus Extrusion, it sounds like the driest topic imaginable, like something you'd read to fall asleep.
Right.
But then you crack it open and you realize it's this high-stakes decision matrix. It's like a choose-your-own-adventure for engineers, where the wrong choice means the safety system fails.
Or the project goes millions over budget.
Yeah.
Or the whole manufacturing line just grinds to a halt.
Exactly. So that's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to decode this battle between two manufacturing heavyweights, injection molding and extrusion. We'll try to understand how they apply to this life-saving material they call LithiumPrevent.
And there's a fascinating tension here. The guide presents it almost like a paradox.
The heat.
Yes. You're trying to manufacture a safety shield that is designed to react to heat by using processes that require a massive amount of heat to even work.
It's like you're trying to forge a shield in the very fire it's designed to protect against without setting it off.
That's a perfect way to put it.
So let's set the scene. Imagine you're an OEM engineer, it's early 2026. You're at your desk, you're staring at a CAD model of a new battery pack. You have this amazing fire-resistant material, this intumescent composite, but now you have to decide how to shape it.
Do you squeeze it out like toothpaste, or do you blast it into a mold? And that decision, it's not just about the shape, it's about what I call the architecture of safety. How you build the part literally defines how well it protects someone.
Okay, so before we get into this battle of the processes, we have to understand the material itself. The source focuses on intumescent thermoplastics. Now, I get plastic and I get thermo, but intumescent, that's a $5 word.
It's a great word, isn't it? In plain English, it just means a material that swells up when it gets hot. So, think of it this way. To the naked eye, this LithiumPrevent material, it just looks and feels like a hard, rigid plastic. You could knock on it. It's structural. But it is chemically programmed to react to a very specific trigger.
And that trigger is heat.
Precisely. According to the data here, the start expansion temperature is right around 200 degrees Celsius. So if a battery cell starts to fail, we call thermal runaway, and the temperature spikes, this material, it just wakes up.
It doesn't just melt.
No, it expands. The source says it expands 2 to 3 times its original volume.
So it's kind of like popcorn.
In a way, yes.
Yeah.
But instead of a fluffy snack, it creates a char. It becomes this hard, porous, carbon-rich barrier. And that char does some serious heavy lifting. It blocks the heat, it stops smoke, and uniquely for this application, it blocks electrical arcing.
That's the part that surprised me. It's not just a heat shield, it's an electrical shield that deploys itself.
That's the concept of passive fire containment. It's passive because it just sits there waiting, maybe for the entire life of the vehicle. But when that battery goes critical, it becomes very, very active.
Okay, so those are the stakes. But here's the catch, and this is where the engineer's headache really starts. You have to manufacture this part without setting it off. You said the activation temp is around 200 C.
Correct. Roughly 200 degrees.
But to melt plastic to shape it,
Yeah.
Don't you have to get it pretty hot?
You do. And that is the absolute crux of the problem. You are walking a tightrope. You need the material hot enough to flow so you can make a part, but if you go just a few degrees too high or keep it hot for too long, you trigger that expansion inside your machine.
Which I'm guessing is bad.
Catastrophic for the process. If it expands inside the machine barrel, it seizes up. You shut down the line, take everything apart, clean out this hardened char. It's a complete nightmare.
All right, so let's look at the two contenders the guide offers to solve this. First up, Extrusion. The source calls this one the stream. Why that metaphor?
Because extrusion is a continuous process. Imagine squeezing toothpaste out of a tube. As long as you keep squeezing, you get a long, continuous line of toothpaste.
Right.
Extrusion is the industrial version of that. You're feeding polymer pellets into this massive machine.
And the material here is specifically LithiumPrevent 200REX. I'm guessing the EX is for extrusion.
That would be the logical code, yes. So you feed these 200 REX pellets into a hopper. They fall into a heated barrel. Now, pay attention to the temperature range the guide lists here. It says the barrel is heated to between 180 and 230 degrees Celsius.
Well, hold on, pause. You just said the material starts expanding at 200. If the barrel is at 230, aren't you just guaranteeing an explosion?
You'd think so, right?
Yeah.
This is where the physics of the stable melt window comes in. It's all about time and pressure. The machine uses this rotating screw to mix the material and push it forward. So the material gets hot, yes, maybe even hotter than its trigger point for a split second, but it's moving.
So it's a speed run.
Exactly. It's about residence time. You're betting you can melt it, shape it, and cool it down before that chemical reaction has time to really kick in. The screw pushes this hot goo through a die, the nozzle that gives it the shape, and then immediately into a water bath to freeze it.
That sounds incredibly stressful. It's like holding a grenade with the pin pulled, but you're betting you can throw it in a bucket of ice before it goes off.
That is actually a surprisingly good analogy. It requires absolute precision. If that screw stops turning for even a minute, the heat builds up and poof, the material expands right there in the barrel.
So if it's that risky, why do it? Why would our engineer choose the grenade toss method?
Length and continuity. Imagine you're building a massive battery pack for, say, a truck. You need a thermal separation rib that runs the whole length of the module, maybe 2 meters long. You don't want to mold 10 little pieces and try to glue them together.
No, that sounds like a pain, and it would create weak points.
Exactly. With extrusion, you get one solid continuous strip. The guide calls it the economical choice for these long profiles. And the tooling, the metal die, you push the plastic through, it's relatively simple and cheap. You can churn out kilometers of this stuff.
The source mentions applications like thermal separation ribs and busbar isolation channels. All those sound like long, straight things.
They are. And the guide makes a great point about integrating functions. With extrusion, you can make a profile that isn't just a flat strip. It can be a rail that holds a wire, clips onto a module, and provides the fire barrier. You're doing 3 things with one piece.
So extrusion is the toothpaste tube, great for long, infinite shapes. But a battery pack isn't just long lines. It's full of corners and terminals and complex bits.
Which brings us to contender number 2, injection molding.
The sculptor.
If extrusion is the toothpaste tube, injection molding is the waffle iron. A waffle iron that operates at pressures that can crush a submarine.
The source cites pressures of 100 to 250 megapascals. That is just... It's hard to wrap my head around a number that big.
It is immense force. And here's why you need it. In this process, using the LithiumPrevent 200R grade, you aren't pushing a continuous stream. You're injecting a specific shot of molten material into a closed steel mold. You have to force this thick, viscous plastic into every tiny little corner of that cavity. Instantly.
And then you just hold it there.
You hold it under that massive pressure while it cools. The mold itself is much cooler, maybe 30 to 90 degrees Celsius. So the material hits that cold steel and it freezes in shape. Then ejector pins pop the finished part out.
And this process is for discrete, complex parts, according to the guide. Things with 3D geometry.
Right. Think about all the nooks and crannies inside a battery module. You've got cell spacers, busbar terminal covers, module frames. These aren't straight lines. They're puzzle pieces. They have to fit perfectly around all the electrical components.
The guide makes a big deal about tolerances. It says injection molding has tight dimensional control, around plus or minus 0.005 inches. Extrusion is double that. Does that tiny difference really matter? It sounds like splitting hairs.
In the world of high-speed automotive assembly, 0.005 of an inch is the Grand Canyon. You have robots assembling these packs. If a terminal cover is slightly warped, it won't snap into place. The line stops. And a line stoppage can cost an OEM thousands of dollars a minute. So yes, if you need precision, you need molding.
I liked a term they used in the section on molding. Monolithic components. It sounds very sci-fi.
It's a key concept for efficiency. Monolithic just means one stone. So instead of assembling a vent, a separate mounting bracket, and a separate fire shield, you design one complex mold. And that mold creates a single part that has the vent holes, the snap-fit clips, and the fire protection all built right in.
So you're just reducing the part count.
You're simplifying the whole supply chain.
Yeah.
You source one part instead of three.
Yeah.
But, and there's always but, the entry ticket is expensive.
Tooling costs.
Injection molds are incredibly complex steel instruments. We're talking tens, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars for a single mold. And changeover is much slower. If you realize you made a design mistake, you can't just tweak a dial, you have to cut new steel.
Okay, so let's summarize the head-to-head. Extrusion, the 200REX, is your low-cost, high-speed solution for long, linear shapes. Injection molding, the 200R, is your high-precision, high-cost solution for complex 3D shapes. But I noticed something interesting in the material spotlight section.
What's that?
The electrical properties, both of them are non-conductive. The source lists volume resistivity at roughly 10 to the 15th power ohm centimeters. Why highlight this? I thought we were fighting fire, not electricity.
In a high-voltage battery, fire and electricity are. They're intimately connected. Often the electricity starts the fire. If you put a material inside the pack to stop a fire, but that material conducts electricity, you might accidentally create a short circuit across the bus bars.
You'd be creating the very problem you're trying to solve.
Exactly. You'd be installing a fuse that blows up the battery.
Yeah.
So it is absolutely non-negotiable that these materials are excellent insulators. They have to be able to touch the live parts without conducting any current. That 10 to the 15th figure, it basically means they're a void for electricity. Nothing gets through.
Okay, so we've got the layout, but this is where the guide threw me the curveball. I was expecting it to declare a winner, and the champion is injection molding. But it doesn't. It talks about a hybrid solution.
Because in the real world, engineering is rarely about picking just one winner. It's all about optimization. And the guide says that a lot of engineers, they use both.
How does that actually work in practice?
Well, picture the battery module again. You might extrude a continuous frame using the 200REX material. That gives you the main structural walls of the module. It's cheap, fast, long. But then you have the ends of the module, where all the connectors are.
The complex bits.
Right. You can't extrude a complex end cap.
Yeah.
So for those ends, you snap in an injection molded insert made of 200R.
So it's like Lego bricks. You have the long standard bricks, and then you have the special detailed pieces, and they all just snap together.
That is a perfect analogy. You're building a multi-layer fire protection architecture. You use extrusion, where the geometry is simple to save money, and you use molding, where the geometry is complex to make sure it fits.
And crucially, they're both made of the same core stuff.
The same core chemistry. That's the beauty of it. Whether it was squeezed out of a tube or blasted into a mold, when the fire starts, both parts react in exactly the same way. They both expand, they both char, they both protect.
I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier, the manufacturing risk, that stable melt window. The guide has an FAQ section, and question 9 asks about AI. Can AI be integrated into the process control?
This is where modern manufacturing gets really, really sophisticated. We talked about how dangerous it is to have the barrel at 230 degrees when the material reacts at 200.
The grenade toss.
Right. Humans are good at setting machines, but we're slow to react to tiny fluctuations. If the friction heat spikes for a half a second, a human operator might not even see it until it's too late.
But an AI can.
An AI control system can monitor the melt pressure and temperature in real time, thousands of times a second. And it's constantly tweaking the machine. It micro-adjusts the heater bands, or speeds up the screw, or slows it down. It keeps the material perfectly in that Goldilocks zone, hot enough to shape, but cool enough to stay dormant.
That seems absolutely vital, because if you mess it up, say you partially trigger the expansion inside the extruder, but not enough to clog the machine, you still make the part.
And that's the insidious scenario. You produce a part that looks totally fine, it meets the dimensions, but chemically, it's spent.
Yeah.
It's already used up some of its expansion capability.
So 5 years down the road, there's a crash, a fire starts.
And the barrier doesn't expand, because it already did that back in the factory in 2026. The AI isn't just about efficiency. It's about verifying the latent safety capability of every single part. It ensures the grenade is still live.
That really changes how I look at these components. It's not just a piece of plastic, it's a product of extreme precision. Which leads me to, so what? Why should you, our listener, who might not be an OEM engineer, care about this?
Because these early choices define the DNA of the car. If an OEM chooses the wrong process, say they try to extrude a complex shape to save a few bucks and it doesn't fit quite right, you get rattles, you get wear, you get potential failure points.
Yeah.
Or if they insist on molding everything, the cost of the vehicle goes way up.
It's the balance between affordability and safety.
And compliance. The source drops some heavy names. UL94 VRO ratings, NASA standards. The engineer isn't just picking a shape they like, they're designing to meet strict regulatory codes. If that part fails a burn test, the car doesn't get sold. Period.
It's geometry meeting physics.
That's it. It's about matching the geometry of protection to the physics of the thread. If the thread is linear, like between rows of cells, extrude it. If the thread is a specific point, like a terminal connection, mold it.
I want to leave us with a thought here. We've been talking about smart manufacturing using AI to control the heat. But the source briefly mentions AI-driven material modeling for future developments.
It's developing the next generation of LithiumPrevent.
Right. So currently this material is thermally triggered, it feels heat, it acts, it's reactive. But if we're using AI to control the making of these materials, how long until the materials themselves become smart?
What do you mean by that?
Well, right now it just waits for 200 degrees. But we know battery failure often has warning signs before the heat spikes. Pressure builds up, certain chemicals are released. What if you could program the material to react to those triggers?
That's a fascinating frontier. So a material that stiffens up if it senses a pressure spike, or one that changes its conductivity if it detects an electrolyte leak.
Exactly. Moving from passive fire containment to active material response. We treat this plastic like it's alive because it puffs up, but it's still just reacting to a hammer blow of heat. The next generation might actually see the hammer coming.
That would be a complete paradigm shift. You'd have a battery pack where every structural component is also a sensor and a safety device. The fortress would be intelligent.
It's a wild thought, but for now, I'm just glad there are engineers sweating the details over whether to use a nozzle or mold to keep us safe.
It's the invisible engineering that allows us all to enjoy the silence of the drive.
Indeed. Thanks for getting into the weeds with us. It's a great reminder to look a little deeper at the things we take for granted.
Stay curious.
We'll catch you on the next deep dive.